Hello everyone, welcome back to My Hero Academia Podfics. This will be the continuation of Yuuei Survival Guide. This will be part 26, chapter 26. After the mall incident, Shota and Hitoshi keep a close eye on the teen. It's not suffocating, or overbearing like some kids and teens make it out to be when a parent or guardian likes to hover close. But then again, to Izuku, this is a very different situation. He's glad that they're watching out for him, and grateful that they're so in tune to his needs. He didn't even know that he needed this comfort in a way that he's never had before, but he deeply craved it, apparently. The day following the mall incident, Izuku still hasn't really found his voice. He's quiet, doesn't really know how to feel. He's not sure there even is a right way to feel about it. He knows he's training to be a hero, that dangerous and life-threatening situations are essentially the job description of being one, but that doesn't change the fact that his life had literally hung by one single finger, remaining lifted off of his neck. He isn't even a hero yet, and yet he'd been so close to dying. He'd almost died, in every sense of the word. He doesn't quite know how to wrap his head around it. Shota and Hitoshi don't push him for answers or crowd him. They let Izuku come to them first, and to Izuku's own genuine surprise, he does. He finds himself seeking them out, gravitating towards the two of them like it's a subconscious pull that he's never felt before. A yearning need to be with someone that he knows will keep him safe. Shota and Hitoshi are those people. They are safe. He wants to be close to them. He wants to be tucked under Shota's arm and squeezed in a tight hug from Hitoshi. He doesn't want to let them out of his sight because something about looking at them, seeing them across the room or across the table, calms him down. It's almost ridiculous, really. He'd been by himself for so long, he'd been the only person that he could trust for so long, and yet here he is now, searching for something foreign to him, comfort. And his guardians just seem to take it in stride. Hitoshi doesn't hesitate to wrap Izuku in a hug or hold him close, and Shota doesn't even bat an eyelash when it comes to tucking the teen close into his side. Shota, Izuku has noticed, seems to have a talent of reading Izuku's facial expressions. He seems to always know when Izuku is anxious or panicking, or when he just needs a hug or proximity. He never says anything, doesn't point it out, but he never fails to provide exactly what Izuku needs, even if Izuku doesn't quite know what he needs himself. Hitoshi is also quite good at this, can take one look at Izuku and often softens before asking what he needs. Izuku's not used to it, but he's grateful it's there. It's something that he's not sure he would have coped alone in his old apartment with, had things turned out differently and his teachers not taken him in. It's not just his guardians who keep close. Oboro had jumped on Izuku the second he was in his room with the door shut. It was comforting to squeeze someone who squeezed him back just as tight. Shota and Hitoshi give him good hugs and comfort, but it was still different to clutching desperately at Oboro and having him clutch back. They were equals, friends, and they'd both been there when Izuku's life had been threatened. They'd both heard the words exchanged and feared for Izuku's life. Oboro had watched, unable to do anything more than be there. Tears had welled in Izuku's eyes as he grabbed fistfuls of the back of Oboro's Yuuei blazer jacket, and the ghost had returned the sentiment, clutching at Izuku's sweater, arm shaking and tensing as he held the younger teen closer. They stood like that for a while, wrapped in each other's arms and shaking with shared fear. Izuku had hooked his chin over Oboro's shoulder, and the ghost had turned his head to bury his nose in the junction of Izuku's neck. Izuku had been just as desperate and antsy to envelop Oboro in a hug as he had been his guardians, and he honestly wishes he could have instantly wrapped the ghost in a hug for both their sakes. It's hard to have such a close friend but not be able to revel in such ordinary things like hugs and comfort like everyone else can. It's torture to see his friend so close to breaking, struggling, and not being able to do anything instantly because there's people around. Izuku absolutely hates it, and he knows that Oboro is on the same page. So they take that time enclosed in Izuku's room, Shota and Hitoshi just outside the door and down a hallway in the kitchen, and they hug. Clutch each other close, cry, and it's probably the most relief Izuku's felt since feeling the villain's fingers encircling his throat, despite how he'd clung to his guardians all evening. That night, after Shota and Hitoshi have checked in on him and retired to their own room for the evening, with a hope of actually sleeping, Oboro had been strange and hesitant, and Izuku felt the same way. He'd offered for the ghost to share the bed with him, but like usual, Oboro had been hesitant. He was still cold, but Izuku had something to counter it. The teen had dug out the heated blanket that Hitoshi had bought for him. Only when Izuku was tucked under the heated blanket and his own blankets as well did Oboro finally agree to lie beside Izuku. It's the first time the two of them had shared Izuku's bed, both just craving the proximity of it. Izuku felt immensely comforted by the fact that he wasn't alone, even if his company was a ghost, and Oboro, for the first time in over 13 years, had even drifted in and out of a fitful sleep. The blanket was the first piece of heated equipment his guardians had bought for him, purchased that first day Izuku had asked to make adjustments to his costume in an attempt to counter the cold. Unbeknownst to Izuku, Shoto had asked Izashi to stop by the mall on his way home from Yuuei when Izuku had fallen asleep at the man's side. The dark-haired man had really taken the Hosu and Quirk scare hypothermia incident to heart, and had even connected the dots between Recovery Girl's offhanded comment of Izuku's below-average temperature and the quirk. It was a nice thought, but night was only one of those times that Izuku tended to overheat, and he was a sucker for fuzzy blankets. Still, having the electric blanket in hand that night after Hisashi had returned home honestly overwhelmed the genuine thought that his guardians had put into his problem, after nothing more than an innocent comment from him, had him feeling all soft and squishy inside. Following the blanket, the heated jacket that Izuku often found himself wearing out in public arrived in the mail. It was comfortable and warm. The jacket was rechargeable, and despite the wiring inside that was in the fabric, it was fairly lightweight and flexible, which had given Izuku hope for his heated hero costume design as well. There wasn't a doubt in his mind that the jacket was quite pricey. Izuku tried not to think about that. But if a company could make something as good as the jacket was, he was excited to see what Power Loader and his support course class would come up with Yuei's labs and funds. It had been just a week and a half until he had his new hero costume in hand, and man, that was so cool. He'd stared in awe at the finished prototype for at least a full minute. It hadn't changed much in the design, but it felt different. The cold absorption technology, courtesy of one Hatsume Mei, was a deep green, flexible, leathery sort of fabric that really did absorb the cold. The wires hidden away inside the fabric were small and compact. Izuku hardly even felt them in the suit. He truthfully didn't understand exactly how it worked. His general idea for it had been vague, but somehow Hatsume had made it work. Wearing it didn't even feel like he was wearing anything heated, which was a concern he'd had because he didn't want to overheat if Todoroki, Oboro, or the Vestiges weren't around. Heroics was a physically hard class, and they sweat a lot. He didn't want a costume that'll warm him up even when he's already hot. Heat stroke is almost as bad as hypothermia. We thought of that too. Power Loader had given him a sure nod when Izuku had brought the thought up. There's a thermometer gauge in the cuff of your sleeve that'll constantly read your core body temp, and it'll only activate the heater when your temperature drops below the inputted danger temperature. Oh, and there's also a force activation switch that's hidden inside the collar of the costume, too. Hatsume, who was also taking part in the meeting, rightfully so, considering how much she'd helped with the new costume, had chirped in excitedly. I trust my babies to do their job, but you can never go wrong with a failsafe. It's activated by your DNA, and only your DNA, Midori-kun, making contact with the sensor plate, so it can't be used by anyone against you out in the field. Right. Power Loader sighs, rubbing the back of his neck. Well, just Midoriya's DNA thus far. We can add additional accepted DNA overrides for the sensor in case Midoriya-kun is incapable of force-starting his own suit for any reason, if that's something you're interested in, at least. Since it's a matter of core temperature and the body will start shutting down incredibly fast if the temperature doesn't raise quickly, it's good to have trusted friends and fellow heroes who can activate the suit if all goes wrong. That's a good idea. Shota gives a nod. I'll be requesting a couple precautionary overriders such as myself and a few other teachers, but besides that, I'm sure Midoriya has some people in mind as well. Sure. Power Loader gives the man a knowing nod before shooting the teen a crooked smile. Better safe than sorry when it comes to something like this. The more people Midoriya has who can help him in a pinch, the better. Shota gives a responding nod, but it looks a bit distracted by his own thoughts. Any other differences from the old costume? Oh, yes! Hatsume continued, unfazed by the half-hearted glance of exhaustion from her teacher. The suit will also be always charging. Any source of cold will charge it, external temperature, Todoroki's ice, a shock of cold, like falling in ice water or standing in an industrial freezer. An industrial freezer? Shota cocked an eyebrow, but the girl didn't seem to hear him. Power Loader just offers a shrug when he catches the underground hero's eyes. It's also waterproof. The fabric has been sprayed with an almost plastic spray that sorts, like, it's completely flexible, won't interfere with your mobility. It's completely hydrophobic, which will protect the internal workings as well. Hatsume had flashed a wide, almost manic grin when the boy had stared down at the new costume in his hands. She bounced on her heels and urged him to try it on so they could see the sizing and if it was correct, even though the sizing they used was the exact same as his previous costume that had been a little on the bigger and baggier side. The new costume fit even better than the first. It wasn't skin-tight, but it also wasn't as baggy. It would be a perfect middle ground, and Izuku was sure it would be perfect for allowing some breathe room during the grueling training that the tight fit would encase the warmth and he needed it. It was a damn near perfect fit. Izuku couldn't find anything wrong with the design, inner workings, or anything. They'd tested it first with Todoroki's eyesight under Shota's intense and watchful eyes, and it worked. At first, it didn't appear to be working. Todoroki encased Izuku in a cave of ice, and Oboro, interested in the outcome but also completely worried, had joined him in the cave. He didn't dare touch Izuku, but his proximity was enough to make the air colder. And it had been a very cold moment. He'd almost started to shiver, eyes locked on the thermostat in his cuff. As soon as his temperature dropped to the set number of activation that Shota insisted on, warmth instantly flooded Izuku's body. It was a relief. He could see his breath before him, and his cheeks and nose felt cold, but his body was blissfully warm. Whoa. Oboro studied the costume with an impressed look. He leans over Izuku's shoulder, watching the thermostat on his wrist as Izuku studies it. That support course girl is crazy cool, but kind of scary. Your temperature's already gone up 2 degrees. It's already back to normal. Izuku grinned, nodding in agreement as he called for Todoroki to melt away his confines. And as soon as he was in sight, a pleased smile on his face, Shota's own face of worry melted away to his usual neutral expression. Good results, I take it? I should send Powerloader and Hatsume a thank you card. Besides the added features, the suit didn't move or work any differently than his first one. It was easy getting used to because for the most part the only things that had changed were the automatic things, and even when they're activated, they hardly affected him. The heated wires were so subtle he sometimes didn't even feel them turning on to regulate his temp. The changes were tiny enough that most of his classmates didn't even notice the updated costume. He didn't want his class to know of his inability to retain heat when it came to his quirk, so the only 2 classmates who were informed of the changes due to concerns were Todoroki, obviously, the classmate who'd helped test the new design, and Ida, who'd been there for the Hosu incident and knew that he'd almost died, though neither knew how he almost died past the mysterious hypothermia. Izuku didn't want a bunch of people knowing and babying him. He was still a hero in training, and with this new costume he had little to be worried about. He just knows that even if his classmates don't mean to be condescending and overly cautious when it comes to his well-being, they will be. They're a tight-knit group, and he's seen how worried they get when anyone misses a day for whatever reason. The overflow of support and caution can be overwhelming, however unintentional it may be. So it's kept on the down low. That said, the majority of the teachers know and are given signs to watch out for it from Recovery Girl herself. It doesn't really change anything, but he does notice them keeping a closer eye. So, what can he do? Izuku looks up from his textbook in his lap, staring at Hitoshi with wide, startled eyes. What? It's Monday after school, and Izuku had brought Hitoshi home with him for a study session. It's the first person besides his guardians that he's seen since his almost death with Shigaraki, but it feels good, normal, to talk to a friend, an unassuming party who doesn't really know what happened. He likes having a friend that he can invite over, and it's even better considering that Hitoshi is completely comfortable in the apartment too, considering he spent a lot of his childhood here, and that Izuku's guardians were his uncles. Ro, the other teen shrugs, spinning his pencil between his fingers as he watches Izuku. Oboro, who's sitting in the corner of Izuku's bed, part of the conversation, but not at the same time he watches. He's curled into a small ball and pressed between the wall and Izuku's pillows. The ghost lets out a quiet hum of interest. What does he do? What do you mean? Izuku cocks his head, glancing back at the ghost, before refocusing on Hitoshi. The purple-haired boy pauses to write down an answer on his worksheet. Like, I know he fiddles with lights and stuff. I've seen that. He's been doing that since before you started living here. Scares the absolute shit out of Zashi. He can obviously levitate books. I saw that too, but like, what else? Does he have any ghost talents? Is there anything cool he can do? My whole existence is cool, Oboro pouts. I'm not sure. Izuku glances back at the ghost, for real now, and Oboro just looks as curious as Izuku feels. As far as I know, the light stuff has always happened. I mean, I just met him this year, right? But the book, I don't know, it's pretty new, I guess. It is definitely new, Oboro chimes in. Hitoshi's quiet for a moment, studying Izuku. The green-haired boy taps his pencil anxiously against his English homework, waiting for Hitoshi to speak. How do you play into it? Oboro straightens up behind Izuku, and he hears the near-silent rustling of the ghostly Yuuei uniform as he crawls across the bed and plops down on the edge. to be more involved in part of the conversation. He's already on to you. Izu, you should tell him. I can't. Izuku swallows, glaring down at his worksheet. I get the feeling you're not talking to me. Hitoshi hums softly, his eyes dropping back down to his own English assignment. You can, Oboro shrugs, continuing as if Hitoshi hadn't even said anything. He already knows half of it. What's the problem with him knowing just a little more? Trust someone, Izuku. Preferably someone who's not a ghost. You need allies. There's the problem that Hitoshi might know Oboro's quirk, might know Oboro. When he has more information, he'd been there when Oboro had accidentally used his quirk during the sports festival. He'd seen the clouds. He'd been trapped in the clouds just as Izuku had. Safe to assume that Hitoshi had probably met Oboro when he was alive, or at least been told of him, or seen his face at some point or another. Oboro would have been 15 or 16 the year that Izuku and Hitoshi were born, so he would have died around the time that Hitoshi was 2 or 3, if Izuku's math is right. It's one thing for Hitoshi to keep a random ghost that Izuku sees a secret from his uncles, but it's another entirely different thing for Izuku to ask that he keeps his uncle's dead best friend, who's lingering around in ghost form, a secret from them as well. Still, Hitoshi is smart. He's smart like Shota. He's got quick wit and perspective. He'll make a great underground hero when he's finally transferred into the heroics classes. I think that the ghost can use my energy. Izuku thinks his words very carefully over. He's cautious not to give too much away or mention anything about quirks. He's finally on good terms with Hitoshi. He doesn't want to ruin it by having his friend think that he'd somehow cheated during the festival. Wait, really? Hitoshi perks up in interest. How does that work? Izuku shrugs, tucking his hands into his lap. Well, he couldn't do much before, but after I started living here too, we became friends and started spending time together. He started being able to interact more. Like, he pushed a plate, and then he was able to turn the pages of a book when it was open on the desktop with extreme concentration. Now he can hold the books and pick up stuff briefly. What else can he do? Hitoshi furrows his eyebrows, leaning back against the side of the bed. He narrowly missed phasing through Oboro's legs, but just because the ghost squawks and throws himself to the side quickly. Izuku snorts a laugh, which earns him a confused glance from Hitoshi and a heated glare from Oboro. Sorry, he says to the room, not directed at either for his outburst, and honestly, he's not sorry in the slightest. Izuku forces himself back to the conversation at hand, biting his lip. I'm not entirely sure, he frowns. We haven't tested much. There's been a lot going on recently. You can say that again. Oboro huffs, sinking to the floor and sitting crisscross beside Izuku, a safe distance away from Hitoshi. Yeah, with all those villain attacks, right? Uncle Sho's been a bit high-strung with it when it comes to your class. The USJ incident, and then you had those internships after the sports festival. Man, you heroics class kids are lucky. Internships with pros and watching real fights? We don't do anything cool in Gen Ed. Izuku's not sure Hitoshi has a real grasp on just how hard the heroics course really is, but that's a lesson only learned when you're a part of it, and dropped into the brunt of hero work firsthand. He can tell him everything, preach about the dangers and the not-so-nice aspects, but until you experience it, you never quite understand, so for now, he just nods slowly. Yeah, Izuku clears his throat. But, just quite recently we discovered that he can sleep. We're not entirely sure how it happened, why it happened, but he hasn't been able to since he, Really? Hitoshi's head cocks in interest. That's cool. What other sorts of tests do you want to run? Izuku shakes himself from his thoughts, his gaze shooting to Hitoshi. Maybe we can do some of them. Well, Izuku bites his lip. I've been wondering for a while if he can drink or eat anything when I'm around. I think that the longer that we're in proximity, the more he keeps trying, the easier it'll come to him. The, stronger he'll become. I think that's why he was able to sleep for a little. I've never tried to eat. Oboro puckers his lips thoughtfully. Seemed pointless when I couldn't even touch anything, but you know what I'd actually give to eat? I'd give, well, actually, I don't really have anything else to give besides my soul, and I'd like to keep that. You're so weird. Izuku huffs out, glancing at Hitoshi so the purple-haired teen knows he's not talking to him. He says he's game to try. A pause where Izuku bites his lip before shrugging. More or less, that's what he said, at least. Good. Hitoshi gives a nod. That first test is easy enough, then. Hitoshi nods to himself, pushing himself off the floor and waiting for Izuku to do the same. He does, with a cocked eyebrow and a silent question in his eyes. Hitoshi leaves the room without really waiting for Izuku or Oboro to follow. The two exchange a glance before following along. The living room and kitchen are empty when they arrive, and Hitoshi takes no time to shuffle towards the cabinet and grab a glass. He swats at Blanket before the cat can reach up and grab at his butt, clearly well versed with the cat's antics as well. He fills the glass of water and sets it on the table before crouching beside the snack cupboard and digging around. When he pulls his hand back, Izuku notes a box of Pocky that the other teen quickly tears into. He rips open the packaging inside and steals one for himself. He munches on the stick and offers the package to Izuku, who also takes one before Hitoshi sets it on the table beside the water. He eyes his offering with a nod before turning back to Izuku, lips quirking up faintly in a smile. I hope Ro likes chocolate and water. He did. Oboro nods solemnly, eyeing the chocolate-coated biscuit sticks with a longing look. I love chocolate. Izuku has half a mind to reach over and pat Oboro's shoulder, but he doesn't want to interact with the test yet. Maybe they can do a secondary test later if this one doesn't work when it's just the two of them. That way, if Oboro accidentally uses his quirk, Izuku doesn't have to think of a way to explain. Are you sure we should be doing this now? Izuku asks quietly, looking around the room when, even though he knows his guardians aren't in the main living area. Shoda isn't even home, but Hisashi is. What if Hisashi walks out and sees a levitating glass of water? Then we ask if he'd like some water too. Hitoshi cocks his head, his lips pursed along with his teasing tone. Assuming we get to the point where he can hold it, I'm sure Ro could deliver a drink to him, yeah? Or, Oboro chimes in unhelpfully, if he asks, if you just saw a floating glass of water, you hit him with a, no you didn't, and walk away. That'll leave him reeling. You saw what that did to Hitoshi here with that tactic. I swear, Izuku groans softly, dragging his palms down his face. It's like you two share one brain cell. Being in your guys' company is like being friends with monkeys. You two are the worst at excuses. One to talk, Oboro snorts out, leaning against the table. Wait, what did Ro say? Hitoshi's lips split into a small smile, glancing around the room in earnest. Nothing helpful, Izuku sighs heavily after shooting the ghost a glare. Isashi's too smart for a no you didn't to work on him. But isn't that exactly what you did to me? To make me think it didn't happen, which it obviously did, and all you really did was make me think I was losing my mind. Plus, I think if anyone shares a singular brain cell, it's you and Ro. Can't change my mind on that. We're getting off track. Izuku rubs at the back of his neck with a light flush that dusts over his freckled cheeks. I don't want Hisashi to know at all. Shouldn't we do this somewhere else? Relax, Izuku. Hitoshi plops down in one of the dining table chairs. Sashi's in their room, probably picking out some songs for his show on Friday. He'll have his headphones on, and it's not like he'll hear us talking on a whole hallway den living room away. His hearing isn't that great. Are you sure? Izuku asks meekly, still looking back over his shoulder as if Hisashi would suddenly appear behind them as if summoned. Definitely. Hitoshi nods, fingers drumming on the tabletop before he reaches over to snag another Pocky. We're safe to experiment. Izuku finally allows a tiny nod, not completely content with the thought of doing an experiment involving floating materials in the kitchen, where his guardians could literally walk in at any time, not to mention the fact that Shoda hadn't given a specific time he would return home, when he'd slumped out of the apartment on his way to the police station, where Detective Tsukuchi had requested his personal assistance with the case. Okay. Hitoshi gives a second, more pronounced nod, looking at Izuku first, then the other two empty chairs pushed around the table. Izuku doesn't have the heart to tell the other teen that Oboro was stood at Hitoshi's side, close to the snack and water, not seated at the table. Let's start easy, Ro. Try and pick up one of the Pocky sticks. With pleasure. The ghost grins wide, clearly excited, if blinding. Squinty-eyed smile is anything to go off of. The ghost doesn't sit down in front of the snack, just leans over it, one hand planted on the table for support as the other hovers over the snack with a look of intensity. His first attempt at grabbing the Pocky is a fail. He goes right through both the Pocky and the table. The second he manages to grasp and lift, but it slips through his fingers and drops the tiny distance back down. Hitoshi, despite this being his idea, and knowing there's a ghost with him, having seen a book levitating in Izuku's room, startles as the Pocky moves. Drawing in a surprised gasp, his eyes don't leave the package. The third attempt is like the second, where he manages to get a grip, lift it slightly, but it falls shortly after. The distance of the drop was enough to make the biscuit snap in two when it hits the table. Oboro lets out a groan, glaring between the two pieces. The fourth attempt is where things start happening. The ghost's concentration is sharply focused on the chocolate side of the treat. Figures Oboro would go for that side. His tongue is poked out in concentration like it has been when the ghost was learning how to turn pages of a book. He pinches at the air, like he's psyching himself up to grab it. He reaches down suddenly and snags the piece of Pocky, lifting it up in a wince like he's afraid it'll fall through his fingers. It doesn't. Hitoshi shifts slightly away from the floating piece of Pocky as Oboro gets his grip on it and holds the snack in his hand. He stares down at it like a foreign concept, and after over 13 years of not touching anything, let alone eating, Izuku assumes it probably is pretty foreign. "What now?" Oboro asks dumbly, wide, almost nervous gaze shooting to Izuku for guidance. Izuku flounders for a second. He hadn't expected to get this far. He shrugs, looking between Hitoshi and Oboro. "Take a bite?" Oboro wrinkles his nose before he huffs out an embarrassed sort of laugh. "Oh, yeah, right, a bite. Thanks, I don't know how I forgot that part." Oboro stares down at the Pocky for a moment before exhaling slowly. He lifts the snack to his mouth and pauses again, suddenly looking unsure. His gaze shoots back to Izuku, Pocky stick held up in front of his face. There's a silent question in his eyes, desperate, and Izuku voices it out loud to all of them. "What happens if it doesn't work?" The green-haired teen bites hard at his lip, letting the sharp pain ground him. What happens if it does work?" Hitoshi's quiet for a second as the question sinks in and Oboro is faltering. "If it works," the purple-haired teen slowly, not looking around the room, says, "it'll be a successful experiment. It's not like he can die all over again, right? There's no negative outcomes I can see. It's an innocent test." Izuku sure hopes the ghost can't die all over again, but a new fear settles in his chest. "And if it doesn't, no big deal. We would have tried, and nothing happened. Not all experiments are successful, and this is uncharted territory for all of us." Oboro had been watching Hitoshi, but he glances back over at Izuku when the teen is finished. "Should I try?" Izuku swallows, but nods. He really is curious, and no one's ever heard of a ghost dying twice. There's virtually nothing that could go wrong. Hitoshi's right. It either happens or it doesn't. Oboro gives a suddenly determined nod and glares down at the piece of Pocky like he's gearing up for a battle against a chocolate-covered biscuit stick. He lifts it the remaining distance to his mouth, and he takes a tiny bite. It's really just the chocolate on the end of the stick, though. Izuku almost snorts at the baby bite he takes, and Hitoshi does hide a smile behind his hand as he watches with interest. The purple-haired teen, who only sees a floating piece of Pocky and not the entire entity that's eating it, looks around for the piece of Pocky in the air before looking at Izuku with wide, amazed eyes. "Did he bite it? Because I don't see the end of it anymore. That's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. It was 1 second there and gone the next." Izuku nods slowly, attention back on Oboro, whose eyebrows are furrowed in confusion. He chews slowly. As his mouth curls downwards in an uncertain look, he stares at the Pocky before taking another bite slightly bigger. "I don't taste anything," he tells Izuku, fiddling with the remaining Pocky clutched in his fingers. He shifts, mouth pursed as he lets out a "huh" noise, and Izuku cocks his head in question as Oboro continues, one eyebrow quirked, as he studies the remaining Pocky. "I have absolutely no idea where that just went." "Well?" Hitoshi leans forward, eyebrows furrowed, and his elbows and forearms supporting him. "What's the verdict? I'm on the edge of my seat here." "He doesn't taste it," Izuku relays, his own head cocked in interest. "And he doesn't know where it went. There's nowhere for it to go. He doesn't have a solid form, so I don't think he technically has a stomach." "So it just..." Hitoshi narrows his eyes at the hovering piece of Pocky. "It just disappeared into thin air?" Izuku gives a slow nod as he eyes Oboro. The ghost takes another bite and a pout on his lips. "I know these are delicious, and not tasting it is torture. This is torture, Izuku." "I'm sorry." Izuku huffs a laugh. "It's for the sake of science, though. You're fine. I mean, you could have died all over again, right? Consider yourself lucky." "What?" Hitoshi lets out in confusion as he blinks in Izuku's direction, at the same time that Oboro lets out a groaned moan. "Science sucks, and some sympathy would be nice." "Nothing," Izuku tells his living friend, looking away from the theatrically pouting ghost. "He's just being dramatic. He's upset he couldn't taste the chocolate." "I'm a ghost. Let me have that," Oboro whines, which just makes Izuku laugh even more. "You're so mean, Izu-chan." Hitoshi's mouth quirks up like he wants to ask a question, but he seems to think better of it, and shakes his head. Was that a failure or a success? I don't know, Izuku breathes out honestly. I mean, he successfully ate it, I guess, but he couldn't taste it, and it's just gone now? Does that count as eating? Hitoshi gives a heavy, unsure shrug. I don't know. Hey, do you think I can get a stomachache without a real stomach if I eat too many of these? Oboro asks, and when Izuku looks back at him, the original piece of Pocky is gone, and he's holding two other pieces, one with a large bite taken out of it. Do you really want to test that theory? Izuku leans against the table in interest as Oboro freezes. He stares down at the snack distrustfully. Hitoshi looks back to the Pocky package, prompted by Izuku's words, and curses under his breath in surprise at the two levitating pieces. I'm not sure I'll ever get used to that, man. Oboro stares helplessly at the Pocky in his hand, chomping the piece he'd taken a bite of before guiltily eating the second stick and two big bites as well. Take these away from me, before I eat them all. I don't want to test that theory. Izuku laughs. He follows orders, tugging at the package to sit between himself and Hitoshi. He takes one of the sticks and bites it, Oboro still chewing his own mouthful of Pocky, a pout on his lips as he stares longingly at the package across the table. Hitoshi frowns at the Pocky beside him, eyeing the package like it's been infected by a ghost. Izuku opens his mouth to tell him they're fine, but before he can, Hitoshi gives a light shrug to himself and selects his own, biting it without another thought. What about the water? The purple-haired teen asks around his bite of Pocky. Izuku also turns to the glass of water, watching as Oboro frowns down at it. Bottoms up, I guess. The ghost shrugs after a second, grabbing the glass and lifting it to his mouth. Hitoshi startles at his side, at the quick, not vocally telegraphed by Izuku movements of the glass of water. Oboro jolts in his own surprise at Hitoshi moving so suddenly. Two things happen in rapid succession. First, Oboro barely gets any water in his mouth, making a noise like he's almost drowning in what does make it into his mouth, as the rest of the sloshing liquid splashes onto his Yuuei uniform and splatters to the ground. The second thing to happen is the glass phasing through his hands and promptly shattering on the floor. Both boys startle at the sound, and Izuku even springs to his feet. Water pools around the bottoms of his bare feet, but he doesn't move any further than that. Oh my god! Oboro gasps, and Izuku isn't sure if it's because he's wet, spilled the water, or because he shattered a glass. I'm so sorry, I did not mean to do that. Maybe, Hitoshi looks around the room guilty. Maybe a glass wasn't the best call? My bad. Izuku might have huffed a laugh if he weren't deafened by his own racing heartbeat rushing through his ears. He barely hears the pounding, hurried footsteps coming down the hallway. Not even a second later, a surprised Hisashi rounds the corner, freezing abruptly as he takes in the scene. Hisashi surveys over the damage before drawing in a breath. He eyes the shattered glass and spilled water, but says nothing on the matter. Izuku's not sure if he's worried that the man's upset with him, or happy he's glossing over it for now. Are either of you hurt? Hitoshi shakes his head, and Izuku frowns to himself before repeating the gesture. Okay, neither of you move, Hisashi demands from the doorway before spinning and disappearing. He returns no more than 5 seconds later, now in a pair of shoes. He's also holding a broom. Izuku opens his mouth to offer to clean it up. They had broken it, after all. But as soon as he goes to take a step, Hisashi points at him like he'd read his character while in just one glance. Don't move, kiddo. There's glass everywhere. I'm so sorry, Oboro whines from the other side of the room. It was an accident, Uncle Zashi. Hitoshi frowns, not moving from his seat. The only thing he does is draw his knees up for his feet and legs to be out of the way. Sorry. I know, Hisashi nods, looking between the two of them. You know I'm not mad. I just don't want either of you getting hurt. You're both barefoot, Sunshine. Why don't you go take a seat, and I'll sweep up the glass. Izuku silently obeys, plopping down into his seat and drawing his legs up similar to Hitoshi, anxiety pulsing through his veins as he tucks in on himself. They'd broken Shota and Hisashi's glass doing an experiment. He feels so bad, and to make matters worse, Hisashi's cleaning it up. Hisashi breathes a quiet sigh of relief as Izuku plops down, and it's as fast as the exhale leaves his lips that he's stepping closer to sweep up the chunks of glass. They're everywhere, shattered in random sizes. It takes a second for the man to get most of the bigger pieces swept up and dropped in the trash. Following that, he grabs the mop with another demand for them to stay seated. The water and little shards of glass are mopped away, and when Hisashi finally deems it clean, they're allowed to move. Neither boy does just yet. I'm sorry, Izuku mumbles as Hisashi sets the mop aside. The blonde raises an eyebrow, frowning between the two teens. We just... It slipped, and I should have cleaned it up, because it was my mess, but you did, and I'm sorry for bothering you, because I know you're busy, and you were working, and... It's all right, Izuku, Hisashi tells him softly, reaching over to ruffle his fingers through his hair. It was an accident, yeah? That's okay. I'd rather deal with it with the glass anyways. I'd hate for either of you little listeners to get cut. Besides, bare feet and glass shards do not mix well. You really don't mind? Izuku asked cautiously, fiddling with his own fingers. Nah, Hisashi insists with a wave of his hand. We've got plenty of glasses. It's all right, little listener. No harm done. It's not the first glass to be broken around here, Hitoshi tells Izuku as he finally unfolds from the chair, his feet planting on the floor. He pauses for a second as a wry smile curls onto his lips. I mean, one time, a glass fell right off the table like a ghost or something had pushed it. Oboro glares at the teen, who's innocently glancing around the room. That... The ghost deflates where he's standing. His teeth click together as he shuts his mouth, bottom lip jutting out a pout as he eyes Izuku instead. That was also an accident. I definitely did not push it. I don't even know how I hooked onto that thing, and to be fair, Hitoshi left it on the very edge. Totally not my fault. Yeesh, Hisashi sighs heavily, scratching lightly at his scalp before running his fingers back through his hair. Don't remind me about that, kiddo. Sho still insists it was one of the cats, even though I don't even think any of them were in the room. Honestly, I still think it was just nudged or something. Or something. Hitoshi huffs under his breath, shooting Izuku a knowing look. Definitely or something. Hisashi raises an amused eyebrow at Hitoshi's antics before letting out a quiet sigh. Anyways, I'll leave you two to your own devices since you're both fine. Shoto'll be home soon, but you should know where to find me if you need me. Give me a shout if either of you end up bleeding or unconscious. You and Uncle Sho are literally the two weirdest dudes I've ever known. Hitoshi's face is contorted in disbelief at Hisashi's words. Who says stuff like that? Yeah, well, when you deal with heroic teenagers for a living, you learn to cut to the chase, you dig? Hisashi lets out a hearty laugh, both hands coming up to ruffle through green and purple hair. Holler if you need me. Izuku leans into the touch while Hitoshi bows away from it. The purple-haired teen has a half-hearted scowl directed at Hisashi while Izuku manages a light smile as the man finally pulls away and leaves them in the kitchen. Hitoshi puffs out a heavy sigh, slumping back against the chair as he grabs another piece of Pocky. Was that a successful experiment, at least? I think I almost drowned, Oboro chirps from across the table. The ghost pauses, looking down at his clothes with a heavy frown before he pinches the fabric and pulls it away from his body. And I'm wet. Izuku's face pinches into a frown. I'd say no. Hey, if I can get wet like this, do you think I'd be able to shower? Could a ghost even shower? Tuesday, after school, Hitoshi comes home with Izuku once again. Neither guardian even bats an eyelash at the fact that their nephew is following their foster son around like a puppy. Honestly, both are just glad each boy has a friend. They don't have homework to do today, having finished it that lunch period with the rest of their group of friends. They really hadn't had much to begin with. Most of their classes had been assignment-based, with homework being to make sure the assignment was complete for the next class. Izuku's not entirely sure what their plan is when they trail into the apartment together after walking to the train station with Ida and Uraraka and catching a train home, but Hitoshi had assured the green-haired teen that he had one. And he did. Uncle Zashi, Hitoshi prompts innocently when they step into the apartment, leading Izuku and Oboro into the kitchen where Zashi was making a grocery list. They'd offered to bring the two boys home, but they decided to spend a little bit more time with their friends. What up, kiddo? The man hums in return, not even looking towards them as he searches through the cabinets. Can we use your old game console? Hitoshi asks sweetly, coming from his usual bored tone. Hisashi stills, suspicious as he waits for the teenager to explain himself further. I wanted to show Izuku some of the games that I usually play. He's never played before. I was going to show him this weekend, but, he'll be going away with Uncle Sho for that training camp. Hisashi does pull away from the cupboard now, head cocking in Izuku's direction. The green-haired teen shrugs with a crooked smile, in agreement. He hadn't known Hitoshi wanted to play games, but he'll play along. We finished our homework at school, he adds helpfully. Sure then, Hisashi shrugs. I don't mind. You know where it is. Just make sure to put it away when you're finished. Feel free to take over the living room. Sho and I'll be leaving soon to shop. Anything either of you want us to pick up? Speak now or forever hold your peace, yeah? I'm fine, Izuku assures. Thank you. Yeah, I'm fine too. Hitoshi nods after rolling his eyes in Izuku's direction. Thanks, Uncle Zashi. Shota and Hisashi leave while Hitoshi is setting up the gaming console. Shota comes up behind the couch and ruffles light fingers through Izuku's hair in greeting before eyeing his nephew gruffly. I hope you asked Zashi before touching his stuff. I did. Hitoshi scowls, kneeled on the floor in front of the TV, eyes narrowed at his uncle, who eyes him right back. They did, Hisashi calls back from the kitchen at the same time as Hitoshi is peering into the living room. Leave them alone, Sho. They're good boys. Yeah, Uncle Sho, Hitoshi jeers playfully. We're good boys. I'll believe it when I see it, the man huffs tiredly. Are you two going to be all right while we're gone? The question's directed at both of them, but Izuku feels two sets of questioning eyes locking on him. He gives a nod, trying not to let an embarrassed flush turn his whole face red. He'll admit he's still feeling a bit clingy, but he's finally starting to calm down. We'll be fine. Course you two will. Hisashi shoots Izuku a supportive smile. No doubt about it. We'll have our phones on us if you two have any trouble. There won't be. You'll be gone a couple hours, Hitoshi reminds, finally satisfied with the console. He swiftly changes the TV to an HDMI setting and steps back with the controller in his hands. We probably won't even move. I swear, you two worry more than Mom. Where do you think I learned it? Shota teases lightly, hiding the bottom of his face in the collar of his sweatshirt. Hitoshi huffs in annoyance, plopping down on the couch beside Izuku and leaning back to glare directly at his uncle, towering over the back of the couch. Shota eyes him, mouth still buried in his sweater before ruffling the boy's hair as well. Everyone always thought I was the worrier, Hisashi laughs from the doorway. You are, Shota deadpans, eyeing his husband distastefully. Hey, I'm no worse than you, Hisashi pouts. I thought you guys were leaving. Hitoshi cocks his head, interrupting their bickering with far more ease than Izuku ever thinks he'll be able to muster. Right, Hisashi laughs, carding his fingers through his hair. He's wearing a half bun, so he just drags his fingers through the long strands at the nape of his neck. We're going. Behave, Shota sighs tiredly, finally pulling away from the couch and following his husband to the door. The teen listens to the men leaving as Hitoshi maneuvers through the console menu. Izuku frowns that the control is pushed into his hands, shivering lightly as Oboro leans in close to check out the controller. The ghost lets out a whoop when he sees what game Hitoshi has picked for them. A combat game, one that Izuku knows he'll suck at. And he does. Wow, Izu, the ghost winces 20 minutes later, 4 game overs later. I didn't know someone could be that bad at aiming. Like you could do any better, the boy scoffs, and Oboro squawks in offense. I'm going to assume you're talking to Ro, considering you died for the probably 1000th time, if it weren't for me. Hitoshi cocks his head in Izuku's direction, hardly taking his eyes off the TV, where he's shooting something. The ghost bursts into laughter at Hitoshi's words, and Izuku just pouts. That's an exaggeration. Is it, though? Oboro teases. I didn't come here to be bullied. Izuku huffs playfully. He can't really say he likes video games. I never knew people could be so critical about a shooter game. That's the fun of it, Oboro tells him, seriously watching the screen, and Hitoshi's character intently. And back to your retort, I could definitely do better. Who do you think Hisashi used to play this game with, huh? It certainly wasn't Shota. He's about as good at this game as you are. You played this game? Izuku pauses, looking at the ghost to his side. Hitoshi turns towards them as well, blinking in surprise. I introduced Hisashi, Oboro tells him proudly, chest puffing out like it's an achievement. I actually think this might have been my console. None of my siblings were into games, and I know my folks gave my friends some of my old stuff, but anyways, yeah, this was one of my favorite games. Used to beat Hisashi's ass at it. Whoa, Izuku grins. I didn't know we were sitting with an expert. Your critiques are suddenly more upsetting. Why do I feel like I'm missing something again? Hitoshi pouts, looking between Izuku and the space beside him. He's actually almost looking at the ghost, surprisingly. He says he used to play this game a bunch. Izuku jerks a thumb at Oboro's direction. Says he used to beat all his friends at it. Says he's an expert. I did not say that, Oboro frowns. You definitely implied it. Izuku shrugs in reply. Wait. Hitoshi turns to them fully. Ro's an expert at this game? Wait, can he hold a controller? I'd love to play a self-proclaimed expert. Izuku's thoughts stuttered to a stop, gaze shooting to his ghost friend, who's staring back wide-eyed. Could I hold a controller? Izuku's hands tighten on the controller in his hands before he's holding it out as an offering. Oboro hesitates for just a second before finally reaching out to take it. He has an easier time holding things that are bigger in size, but still lightweight, so unlike with the Pocky the day before, he doesn't drop it. Yeah, Hitoshi mutters. I will definitely never get used to that. Can you push the buttons? Izuku ignores the teen, watching Oboro intently. He still struggles with technology. Phones and screens glitch out, and he tends to drain the battery life on devices, but that doesn't seem to be a problem with the remote. Oboro's thumb hovers over one of the buttons, and in the next second the game resumed, Oboro's character shooting Hitoshi's. Hey! The purple-haired teen squawks, swirling around at the screen, and the You Died music plays. Asshole! I wasn't even ready, and we're on the same team. Oboro is absolutely cackling. Hitoshi pouts as Oboro adjusts his hold on the controller. Izuku looks between the two of them, smiling to himself as he does so. The look almost drops off his face when he sees Oboro completely frozen in place, staring cautiously at the screen. He opens his mouth to ask what happened when Oboro's controller buttons make clicking noises as they're used, and the screen changes to a chat log. Hitoshi freezes, too, as it opens, and Izuku feels like he can't even breathe as the online cursor swiftly flies over the on-screen keyboard. Hi. Holy shit! Hitoshi flails in surprise, staring at the screen before his head turns to the floating controller. He swallows nervously. Hi, Ro. Oh my god, Oboro whispers in awe. I can talk to him. Whoa. Hitoshi. I'm so afraid right now. Hitoshi gives a nervous laugh, rubbing at the back of his neck. This feels a bit too much like a Ouija board or something. Sorry. Izuku's basically a Ouija board. I am not. Izuku sputters, turning to glare at the screen, and then intently at the ghost. You kinda are, Oboro shrugs. Rose actually got a point with that one, man. It feels like it's always 2 against 1 with you two, Izuku pouts, but he doesn't linger long. This is really cool. I never thought, Ro would be able to really communicate with anyone but me. What, mad you gotta share your ghost friend? Hitoshi teases. You wouldn't want him, if you could see the stupid grin on his face. Oboro pouts. Ouch. Harsh, Izuku. Hitoshi snickers playfully, gesturing to the ghost with one hand and the TV screen with the other. Look, you hurt his feelings. No, you two are insufferable. Izuku sinks back into the couch, arms crossing over his chest. I'm not talking to either of you anymore. That really sucks for the one who uses my laptop to watch rom-coms. Hitoshi shoots a sly look at the floating controller as the buttons mash hurriedly. I like the plot. That can't be your excuse for everything, Izuku teases from his slumped position. Yeah, man, Hitoshi nods, grinning like a Cheshire cat. Just admit you like the dirty stuff. You're so mean. Tell me something I already don't know, my friend. Hitoshi gives a dramatic sigh, eyebrows arcing gleefully. Now, are we going to play or not? Izuku promised an expert, yeah? You're on. Finally, some competition. Hitoshi pauses, glancing at Izuku, who's waiting with narrowed eyes to make eye contact. No offense, Izuku. Offense taken. The green-haired teen sighs, sinking even lower onto the couch. Hitoshi frowns, looking at the controller and then the TV. Why don't you ask me those questions that you were talking about at lunch last week? The ones about my quirk? You didn't want to answer those, Izuku reminds, brows furrowed in confusion. I didn't want to answer at school, the other replies slowly. I'll answer them here. Besides, Ro probably needs me to have a sabotage anyways. It's a favor for him. Cocky. Courteous, Hitoshi corrects, shooting the hovering controller at his side a grin. We playing or not? Feel free to, menu if you have stuff to say or, you need a break or something. Let me go get my notebook first. Izuku chirps, jumping off the couch and padding down the hallway in a hurry. Don't start without me. The controller doesn't move to follow Izuku or stop floating, so Hitoshi knows the ghost hadn't left. It's oddly comforting that the ghost likes him enough to stay with him until Izuku returns. You're not as scary as I thought you were, Hitoshi finds himself saying to the empty room. The controller stills before the buttons start dipping as they're pressed. Thank you. I didn't mean to scare you. You wanted to scare my uncles, didn't you? No comment. Hitoshi laughs aloud, leaning back against the couch easily. You're pretty cool, Ro. Not so bad yourself, Hitoshi. Hitoshi just shivers as he reads his name on the screen. It's still weird that you know my name. I'm back, Izuku chirps as he rounds the couch and collapses back into his spot. Good. Hitoshi grins as the ghost exits out of the chat logs. We can start now. You ready to go, Ro? He's ready, Izuku replies without even looking up from the notebook in his hands. Hitoshi grins as he starts the game. It takes a second for Izuku to organize himself, but when he does, Hitoshi and Oboro are already in a game. So, what did you say you were asking questions for? Hitoshi asks, half distracted by the game. I just like to analyze quirks. Izuku shrugs, tugging his knees up to his chest so he can use his thighs as a table, propping his notebook open. It's always been a hobby. I've done all the great heroes, and now I'll do you too. All of them? Hitoshi glances over quickly. Like Uncles Sho and Zashi? Uh-huh. Izuku nods, flipping to a new page where he writes some basic stuff. And most of the Yuuei teachers. All Might, Midnight, Snipe. I've done some Limelights and occasional Undergrounds when I can find them. The top 10, Hawks, Endeavor. I get it. Hitoshi huffs a laugh. I'm convinced. Nothing too invasive, though, right? Nope, Izuku assures. Just some things that I've been dying to ask, like, where did your quirk come from? It's super cool, but it's nothing like Shota's, and he's your uncle, so... Inherited? Hereditary? Izuku's almost vibrating in his seat as the words tumble out of his mouth. It wasn't often he actually could ask questions and got answers, plus Hitoshi's quirk was just so cool, and he'd only seen it once during the festival. Well, the other boy hums thoughtfully. One of his fingers is in use tapping against the controller. My mom has a hypnosis quirk. Well, it's a bit more like a paralytic. She can't give suggestions like I can when people are under the effects, but she can ease people into a hypnotized state, and my dad has a persuasion quirk. People are still in full control, conscious, but they're compelled to follow his suggestions, I guess. He doesn't use it very often. Oh, so you got the best attributes for both. Izuku bounces in his seat, thrilled at new information. An aspect of your mother's paralytic that takes control and opens their mind to suggestions, and your father's persuasion that acts as a hypnotic trance. Hitoshi blinks, looking away from the screen to glance at Izuku. Yeah? You don't think it's, weird or... That is so cool. Your quirk is perfectly suited for hero work. I mean, think about the hostage situations that you could diffuse. Hostage negotiations could be solved with just a question from you. Izuku blinks, turns curious eyes to the other teen. It is question-based, right? That's what I noticed during the festival. Yeah. Hitoshi frowns as he pushes some buttons. Izuku has no idea what he does, but beside him, Oboro groans. Question activated, but not all questions. I have to want to use my quirk, and the question has to be directed at someone. I can't ask a question aimed at, say, Uncle Sho, and take control of you if you answer it instead. Izuku scribbles that down in his notebook, lifting his pen to his mouth to chew on the end of it when he's finished. I was wondering about that. How many people can you control at once? Limitations? Gets harder the more people I have under, Hitoshi answers, turning to him with a raised eyebrow. The most I've had under it is 3, and I can't make them do anything they couldn't do of their own conscious mind. I also can't give instructions with too many steps. 3, Izuku hums before looking at Hitoshi. The festival, right? Ojiro mentioned you used your quirk on him, and I'm assuming the rest of your team as well? He warned me, you know. I didn't heed it very well, though. No, Hitoshi agrees with a sly smile, looking half at the screen and half at Izuku. You were actually pretty easy to get under. Hitoshi goes quiet after, though, looking unseeing at the screen before briefly at Izuku. Eyebrows furrowed thoughtfully. I played pretty dirty during the festival. No, you didn't, the green-haired boy denies without looking up from his writing. Quirk usage was encouraged. We all have ours. We use them. Why was it playing dirty for you to use yours, too? And besides, you didn't even play dirty, you just played into the element of surprise, which was pretty genius, actually. Yeah, but your guys' quirks aren't invasive. Hitoshi shrugs, joystick moving under the ministrations of his thumb. I literally get in your head and take control. When you're under my quirk, you're at my mercy. It's villainous. No. Izuku does look up now, mouth pressed into a frown. No quirk is villainous. It's what a person does with it that's the defining factor. No quirk is villainous, but in the sense that any quirk could be villainous. You wouldn't say quirks like erasure are villainous, right? You sound just like Uncle Sho. Hitoshi huffs, head cocking to the side slightly. A quirk is a tool. It's what you do with it that matters, not what it can do. Hitoshi mimics Shota's monotone drawl almost perfectly. The green-haired teen hides a laugh behind his hand. He's right, though. Uh-huh. Hitoshi snorts, shaking his head. He leans closer to Izuku, attempting to see what's in the notebook he's working on. So what's with the notebook? I thought you were just asking questions. Oh. Izuku pauses, tugging the book toward his chest. I record them, too. It's really just analysis, like I said before. I've always liked quirks, so I decided to analyze them. It's just a hobby, and they're not very good. It's weird, I know. It's not. Hitoshi shakes his head. It's pretty cool. How many do you have? Analysis entries or notebooks? Hitoshi's eyebrows shoot up in surprise. Both? 13. Izuku bites his lip. 13 journals and, 13 journals worth of entries, but take into account that the first couple are in crayon and not all the pages are actually analysis, so a lot. No kidding. Hitoshi blinks, leaning back against the couch. Yeah, Izuku gives a nervous laugh. Creepy, huh? No. Hitoshi frowns, sinking further into the couch and eyeing Izuku thoughtfully. Why would it be creepy? Analysis is an actual job. People get paid to do what you do for free. If your analysis is creepy, then so is my quirk. But your quirk isn't... Then neither is your analysis. Izuku blows out a breath through his nose. He knows Hitoshi's not going to let it go. Out of the hundreds telling him he's not actually creepy. It isn't good odds, but he doesn't want to argue over it. Okay. For the record, Oboro chimes in, not tearing his eyes away from the screen. I never thought it was creepy. Very insightful. Seeming satisfied with Izuku's answer, Hitoshi arches an eyebrow and turns back to the screen. So, has anyone looked at your analysis entries? Shota, Hisashi, anyone? Izuku shakes his head frantically. Can I? Izuku chokes on a breath. They're not, good, Izuku offers slowly. It's just a hobby, you know? Something to occupy my time and, I just do them for me. Sorry. Nah, Hitoshi shakes his head. That's fair. Maybe sometime you'll let me check out my analysis. I'm sure it'll be useful, and I'm sure the ones you have on 1A, because I know you definitely have them, would be useful if I ever managed to get in. If you get into the class, I'll let you read some analysis, but maybe not on our peers without their consent. Pros are fair game, though, because a lot of it is actually public information, Izuku offers. Think of it as a consolation prize for achieving your goal. Positive reinforcement? Hitoshi raises an eyebrow, lips curling into a smile. Wait, consolation? What you saying here, Izuku? It'll be tough joining our class, even though I know you can do it, Izuku offers with a smile. I said what I said. Izuku asks a couple more questions, and Oboro and Hitoshi play for a while longer, so long, in fact, that none of them even hear the door open. It's Oboro, who lets out a yelp of surprise, and suddenly the controller that had been in the ghost's hands is flying in front of Izuku's face, and he's dropping his pencil in an attempt to catch it before it hits the ground. Izuku manages to grab a hold of the controller just as Shota rounds the corner, eyeing them. Good. Nothing's on fire, and you're both alive. Such high expectations, Hitoshi drawls in return, sounding unfazed but looking guilty. Maybe that's why the boy doesn't turn to look at his uncle like Izuku does. Shota huffs a breathy laugh as he steps closer to the couch, pausing behind it as he had earlier. The two boys tense up, and Oboro sucks in a nervous breath. It doesn't help Izuku feel at ease in the slightest. The man is quiet for a second until... Why do you have your notebook and a controller, problem child? Shota eyes the book that's resting in the teen's lap, and the controller is upside down. Almost as if reading his mind, he speaks. The teen flushes and turns the controller so he's awkwardly holding it before Shota can even finish the sentence. Multitask? Izuku is a dude of absolute skill, Uncle Shota. Hitoshi adds blandly, not even looking away from the screen. Shota blinks once, then twice. He sighs heavily, rubbing at his eyes with his thumb and forefinger. I don't understand, kids. Why do I even try? Izuku watches as Shota turns on his heels, walking into the kitchen to help Hisashi put groceries away. The blonde laughs, but Izuku doesn't know what Shota said to prompt it. He bows his head in embarrassment anyways. He did not buy that at all, Hitoshi whispers. I mean, Oboro laughs breathily. He was holding the controller the wrong way. You gave it to me like that, Izuku hisses under his breath. All right, everyone, this concludes Chapter 26 of Yuuei Survival Guide. I really like this chapter. I hope you guys did as well. Chapter 27 will be next, and as always, thank you all so much for listening.